I'm Ava, a 29-year-old stay-at-home mom living in a cozy house I inherited from my grandma. It's not just any house. It's a piece of my childhood filled with memories of baking cookies with grandma and playing hide and seek in its spacious rooms. Now, it's home to my own little family. My husband, Mark, a hardworking manager, and our 2-year-old sunshine Lily. Life sounds picture perfect, right? Well, it's not. The problem starts right next door, where Mark's parents, Helen and Frank, live. Our relationship, let's just say it's like mixing oil and water. Mommy, more juice! Lily's voice cuts through my thoughts. I pour her some juice, glancing at the clock. Almost 5 p.m. Time for the daily invasion. As if on cue, the door swings open. Ava, we're here! What's for dinner? Helen announces, with Frank shuffling in behind her. Hi, Helen. Frank? I've made a casserole, but it's just enough for Mark, Lily, and me, I reply, trying to keep my voice steady. Frank frowns. What do you mean, just enough? You know we come over for dinner? Helen chimes in, her tone sharp. You're at home all day, Ava. Is it too much to ask for a decent meal? I take a deep breath, feeling the frustration bubble up. I have my hands full with Lily, and cooking for 4 is a bit much every day. Mark walks in, tired from work. What's going on here? Your wife doesn't want to cook for us, Frank says, his voice raising. Mark looks at me, then at his parents, and sighs. Can't you just make a bit more, Ava? My frustration peaks. It's not about the amount, Mark. It's about respect and boundaries. Helen scoffs. Boundaries. We're family. Lily, sensing the tension, tugs at my dress. Mommy, I'm hungry. I kneel to her level. Let's get you seated, sweetie. Dinner is a tense affair. Mark's parents eat the sandwiches they brought, throwing disapproving glances my way. The TV blares in the background. Lily's fidgeting in her chair, and I'm trying not to crumble under the weight of this daily chaos. After they leave, Mark sits on the sofa, absorbed in his phone. We need to talk about this, I say, standing in front of him. He doesn't look up. Not now, Ava. I'm tired. And just like that, I'm left alone in the kitchen, cleaning up the mess, both literally and metaphorically. This is my life, a constant battle of wills, with me on one side and the world on the other. Life has a funny way of testing you, and mine's turning into a daily pop quiz with no right answers. I'm Ava, still juggling motherhood, a marriage that's running on autopilot, and in-laws who've mistaken my home for a free-for-all diner. It's another morning in our house, and I've made a decision. Today, I'm cooking only for 3, me, Mark, and our little Lily. Let's see how this goes. Lily's in her high chair, happily smearing oatmeal on her face when Helen and Frank barge in, just like clockwork. Morning, Ava. What's for breakfast? Helen asks, a bit too cheerily. I take a deep breath. Morning. I've only made enough for Lily and me today. Frank's face turns red. What do you mean? Are we supposed to starve? No, you're supposed to take care of your meals, I reply, trying to keep my voice calm. Helen's eyes narrow. This is ridiculous, Ava. We are family. You can't just... I cut her off. I can, and I did. I have enough on my plate with Lily and the house. Mark comes in, rubbing his eyes. Why's everyone shouting so early? Your wife refuses to cook for us, Frank's voice booms. Mark looks at me, then at his parents, and says, Ava, why are you making things difficult? Difficult? I almost laugh. Mark, I'm not a 24/7 restaurant. I need help, not more mouths to feed. Mark doesn't say anything, just grabs a piece of toast and leaves for work. The day drags on. I can feel the tension thickening in the air. Dinner time rolls around, and I've stuck to my guns. Dinner for 3. Helen and Frank show up, each holding a sandwich. They sit down, unwrapping their food with exaggerated slowness. The TV's volume goes up, and up, until it's like we're at a rock concert. Lily's rubbing her eyes, clearly struggling to stay awake amidst the noise. "Could you turn that down?" Lily's trying to sleep, I ask, my patience wearing thin. Frank grunts. "We can't hear it if it's any lower." Helen adds, "You shouldn't be so uptight, Ava. It's just TV." "It's not just TV. It's my home turning into a battleground, and I'm losing." Lily starts to cry, and I scoop her up, escaping to the quiet of her room. Later, Mark comes home to find his parents still there. The living room, a mess. Lily asleep in my arms. "What happened here?" he asks, looking around. "I'm too tired for another round of arguments. Just the usual," I say, my voice flat. He doesn't push it, and neither do I, but inside, I feel something shift. I'm at my breaking point, and something's got to give. Every day feels like walking on eggshells in my own house. I'm Ava, still trying to find a balance between being a mom, a wife, and now, apparently, an unwelcome host to my in-laws. But today, it's not the in-laws that shake my world, it's Mark. It's late evening. Lily's finally asleep after what felt like hours of soothing. I'm clearing up the toys when Mark walks in, looking like he's carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. "Ava, we need to talk," he says, avoiding eye contact. I sit down, bracing myself. "What is it, Mark?" He takes a deep breath. "I made a mistake with our finances. I invested in something and it didn't pan out." I feel a chill run down my spine. "What do you mean? How bad is it?" "It's bad, really bad. I've lost. A lot. Like $100,000. My heart stops. 100,000? How could you do that without telling me? Mark runs his hands through his hair, looking anywhere but at me. I thought I could make it big, you know? Fix everything. Fix what? We were fine. I can barely keep the tremor out of my voice. He finally looks at me, his eyes pleading. I know, but now we need a plan. A plan? I echo, feeling numb. Yeah, I was thinking, maybe we could move my parents into our house, rent out their place to cover the debts. My mind races. His parents in our house? Full time. The very thought makes me feel like I'm suffocating. Mark, are you serious? After everything with your parents, you want them here in our house all the time? He sighs. I know it's not ideal, but we don't have many options, Ava. I stand up, anger and disbelief swirling inside me. Not ideal. It's a nightmare, Mark. And you just decided all of this without even talking to me? He stands too, his voice rising. What was I supposed to do, Ava? I'm trying to fix this. By making my life a living hell, I shoot back. There's a silence, heavy and suffocating. Finally, I speak. My voice barely a whisper. Fine. Move them in. But this is on you, Mark? He nods, looking relieved and guilty all at once, but all I feel is a deep, sinking dread. This isn't just about money anymore. It's about trust, and I'm not sure how we come back from this. The day my in-laws moved in, it wasn't just their suitcases that entered our home. It was a tidal wave of chaos. Right from the start, it's clear that Helen and Frank are here to stay, and they have their own ideas about how things should be. Frank, put that box in the living room and careful with it. Helen's voice echoes through the hallway as she directs her husband with military precision. I watch, holding Lily, who clings to me, wide-eyed at the commotion. Then, as if things couldn't get worse, Helen turns to me, Ava. We need to talk about rearranging the house. We need space for our things. I feel a knot in my stomach. Rearranging, Helen? There's not much space to work with. She waves her hand dismissively. Nonsense. Let's start with Lily's playroom. She can play in her bedroom, right? I'm taken aback. That's her space, Helen. She loves it there. Frank, carrying a heavy box, chimes in. Kid won't mind, Ava. Don't make a fuss. Lily buries her face in my neck, and I realize this is just the beginning. The days that follow are a blur of unwelcome changes. Helen and Frank unpack their belongings, turning the living room into their personal space. They replace my tasteful decor with their old-fashioned knacks, and the TV blares day and night with their favorite shows. I try to cook dinner one evening, with Lily tugging at my apron. Frank strolls in, eyeing the pots on the stove. What's this? Another one of your experimental dishes. I bite my tongue. It's a new recipe, Frank. If it's not to your liking, feel free to make something yourself. He laughs. In my day, women knew how to cook for their families. I feel a flash of anger, but before I can respond, Mark enters, looking weary. Can't we have one peaceful meal? I turn to him, my patience wearing thin. Peaceful? Mark, your parents have turned our home upside down. He avoids my gaze, grabbing a beer and retreating to the now occupied living room. Weeks pass, and the tension only grows. Helen has opinions on everything, from how I raise Lily to how I should manage the house. Frank, meanwhile, has taken to criticizing my cooking at every meal. One afternoon, I'm folding laundry when Helen walks in. Ava, these sheets aren't folded properly. Let me show you how it's done. I set my jaw. Thanks, Helen, but I've been folding sheets my whole life. She tuts, clearly not the right way. As she refolds the sheets, I feel a sense of helplessness. My own home no longer feels like mine. Night falls and I'm lying in bed, staring at the ceiling. The muffled sounds of the TV and my in-laws' laughter seep through the walls. Lily is asleep, but rest eludes me. I think back to the days when this house was filled with love and laughter, a stark contrast to the present. It feels like I'm losing a part of myself, bit by bit, as each day passes. Mark's side of the bed is empty. He's been spending more and more time, working late. I'm left alone, wondering how things got this bad, and what, if anything, I can do to take back control of my life and my home. In a house that once felt like mine, I'm Ava, now a spectator in my own life. With my in-laws' takeover and Mark's growing distance, I'm left grappling with suspicions that refuse to settle. One afternoon, while Lily naps and the house is momentarily quiet, I call my brother, Jake. He's always been the one I turn to in tough times. Hey, Jake, I say, trying to sound casual. Ava, how's it going? Haven't heard from you in a while. I take a deep breath. Not great, Jake. I'm worried about Mark. He's different. Jake's tone shifts, more serious now. Different how? He's always working late, secretive with his phone, and there's this tension, like he's hiding something. Jake pauses, then says, You think he's seeing someone else? The words sting, even though I've thought them 1,000 times. I don't know, Jake. I just feel like I'm losing him. There's a resolve in Jake's voice when he speaks. Let me do something. I have a friend, a private detective. He can discreetly check on Mark, see what's up. I'm hesitant. A detective? Isn't that a bit much? Ava, if something's wrong, you need to know. For you and Lily. I sigh, a mix of relief and fear. Okay, do it. But, Jake, keep it quiet. I don't want to stir up more trouble if it's nothing. You got it. I'll take care of it, he assures me. Days pass, and each of Mark's late nights and hushed phone calls add to my growing unease. Then, one evening, Jake calls. Ava, I have some news. Can you meet me tomorrow? Just you? My heart sinks. Yes, I can make it. The next day, I sit across from Jake in a quiet cafe, the air thick with anticipation. So, what did you find out? I ask, my voice barely above a whisper. Jake hesitates, then hands me an envelope. Ava, it's not good. I open it to find photos and reports. There's Mark with a woman I don't recognize and a child. My world spins. He has a child? Jake nods solemnly. I'm sorry, Ava. The detective confirmed it. Mark's been living a double life. Tears blur my vision. How could he do this? To me? To Lily? Jake reaches across the table, his hand on mine. You're stronger than you know, Ava. We'll figure this out together. I nod, wiping away tears. I need to confront him, Jake. He has to explain this. Be careful, Ava. You don't know how he'll react. I have to know, Jake. I have to know why. Armed with the truth, but shattered inside, I head home. A confrontation is inevitable, and I need to brace myself for the storm that's about to hit. It's the evening of the dinner, and I'm Ava, preparing a meal that I know even my critical mother-in-law can't find fault with. The house is buzzing with a tense energy as I await the arrival of my brother, Jake. Tonight is about more than a family dinner. It's about unveiling a painful truth. As I set the table, I can feel the weight of the envelope in my pocket, heavy with the evidence of Mark's betrayal. My hands shake slightly, but I steady myself. This needs to be done. The dinner starts off like any other. Mark's parents, Helen and Frank, along with Mark, sit around the table, complimenting the food for a change. I catch Mark's eye, and he gives me a small, oblivious smile. It's almost time. Jake arrives, apologizing for being late. As he sits down, he casually turns to Mark. So, Mark, Ava told me about your investment ventures. Sounds interesting. Mark, caught off guard, coughs. Oh yeah, it's nothing big. I watch as Jake probes further. What kind of investments? Stocks? Real estate? Mark stumbles over his words. A bit of everything, really. I can see the confusion on Jake's face, feigned for the others, but all too real for me. Can you tell me more? I've been looking to invest myself? Mark fumbles, clearly out of his depth. It's complex stuff, hard to explain over dinner. That's my cue. I pull out the envelope and place it on the table, pushing it towards Mark. Maybe this will help explain, I say, my voice steady. Everyone's attention shifts to the envelope. Mark opens it, his face draining of color as he sees the photos, him with another woman and a child. Helen gasps, Mark, what is this? Frank looks on, stunned into silence. Mark tries to speak, but nothing coherent comes out. He looks at me, betrayal in his eyes. Ava, why? Why? You have a second family, Mark. How could you do this to us? So you moved your parents to my house, and with the money you received from renting their apartment, you kept your mistress? I'm almost yelling now, the pain and anger I've been holding back spilling over. The room is silent, the air thick with shock. Helen and Frank look between Mark and the photos, disbelief written all over their faces. You lied to us, to your own family, Helen whispers, her voice filled with hurt. Frank just shakes his head, unable to find words. Mark stands up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I need to explain," he says, "but it's clear no explanation can undo this." He walks out of the room, and I'm left there with his parents in a deafening silence. The air in the house is thick with tension the morning after the revelation. I'm Ava, still reeling from the shock, but ready to face the consequences. Helen and Frank, Mark's parents, confront me in the kitchen, their faces twisted with anger. Helen's voice is sharp as a knife. "You! This is your doing! You drove our son to this!" I stare at her, disbelief and anger mixing in my gut. "Me? Your son lied to all of us, Helen?" Frank chimes in, his voice just as accusing. "He was always a good boy until he married you. You must have pushed him away." My hands tremble with fury. I pushed him away. I cared for our family while he... Helen cuts me off. "Oh, save it. You probably had men on the side too. That's why he did what he did." "I've had enough. How dare you?" I yell. "I've been nothing but loyal and supportive, and you blame me for your son's betrayal?" Frank steps closer, his face red. "Our son would never have done this if it weren't for you." I take a step back, my heart pounding. "You know what? I don't need to listen to this. This is my house, and I want you out. Now..." Helen scoffs. "You can't kick us out. This is our son's house, too." I stand my ground, firm and unwavering. "No, Helen. This house was my grandmother's, and now it's mine. You have no right to be here after what you've said." Frank looks like he wants to argue, but Helen grabs his arm. "Let's go, Frank. We don't need to stay where we're not wanted." As they pack their things, I feel a mix of relief and sadness. Once they're gone, I lock the door behind them, the click of the lock echoing in the empty house. Alone in the silence, I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. I look around the house, my house, and for the first time in a long while, I see a future where Lily and I can be free from lies and betrayal. I pick up the phone to call a locksmith. It's time to change the locks, to change our lives. The house feels different today, like a new chapter has just begun. I'm Ava, standing in my once troubled living room, now a space of peace and possibility. The legal battle is over, and the court's decision still echoes in my mind. I recall my lawyer's words from yesterday. The court has granted you substantial alimony and compensation for Mark's deceit and infidelity. He'll be paying for quite some time. I had felt a mix of relief and vindication hearing that. It wasn't about the money. It was about accountability. Lily, oblivious to the complexities of the adult world, plays on the floor. Her laughter is a balm to my soul. I watch her, thinking about our future. The phone rings, snapping me back to the present. It's Jake, checking in. "Hey, Ava, how are you holding up?" I smile. "Better, Jake. Much better." The court's decision helped close a painful chapter. Jake's voice is warm. "I'm glad, Ava. You deserve peace after all this." I glance at Lily. We both do. As I talk to Jake, I can't help but think about Mark. The last I heard, he was struggling to make ends meet, now living with his parents again. "It's ironic," I say to Jake. "He's back where he started, but this time by his own doing." Jake sighs. "He brought it on himself, Ava. You did what you had to do." I nod, feeling a sense of closure. Mark's choices led him here, and I no longer feel any obligation to worry about him. After the call, I sit with Lily, watching her play. The court's decision has given us a financial cushion, but more importantly, it's given us freedom. "Mommy, look!" Lily holds up a drawing of our house. "Our home," she says proudly. I hug her. "Yes, sweetie, our happy home." I realize then that this is just the beginning for us. A beginning filled with hope, strength, and the love we have for each other. The road ahead is ours to shape, and I feel ready to embrace whatever comes our way, with Lily by my side.
The moment Elaine, my mother-in-law, walked into the Thanksgiving dinner, her eyes scanning the room like she owned it, I knew trouble was brewing. "How's your mom doing?" she asked, her voice dripping with a feigned concern that couldn't mask the jealousy lurking beneath. As she eagerly suggested a trip to the mountains, blatantly ignoring the gravity of my mother's illness, I realized that this wasn't just about her wanting time with us. It was a twisted game of one-upmanship where her need for attention clashed with our somber reality. Life before September was a quiet stream, flowing undisturbed. My husband Jake and I had carved out a modest life in our bustling city, far from our hometowns. We were content, or so we thought, until the day my phone rang with news that turned our world upside down. "Mom's sick," my brother's voice trembled on the other end. "It's breast cancer, and it's bad." The words hit me like a physical blow. Mom, the invincible matriarch of our family, the woman who had weathered every storm, was now facing her toughest battle. Metastatic breast cancer. The words echoed in my mind, a relentless reminder of the fragility of life. Jake held me that night, as I cried, his arms a stronghold against the chaos unraveling within me. We knew what we had to do. Within weeks, we arranged to work remotely and packed our lives into suitcases, ready to move across the country to be with Mom. Our plan was met with mixed reactions. My in-laws, particularly my mother-in-law, Elaine, were initially overjoyed at the prospect of us moving back. She lived just an hour and a half from my parents, a proximity that seemed convenient but soon proved to be anything but. "Can't wait to have you both nearby." Elaine's voice chirped over the phone, a stark contrast to the somber mood that had enveloped our lives. I appreciated her enthusiasm, or at least I tried to. But as our departure date neared, her excitement morphed into a relentless expectation for our time and attention. It was as if she couldn't see beyond her own desires, blind to the grim reality we were facing. "We should plan a trip to the mountains," she suggested during one of our calls, her tone oblivious to the weight of our situation. I exchanged a weary look with Jake. How could we explain to her that our move wasn't a joyous reunion, but a somber duty to be with my ailing mother? We arrived at my childhood home in November, welcomed by the familiar sights and scents, now tinged with the underlying scent of medication and antiseptic. Mom, once vibrant and full of life, was a shadow of her former self, the cancer stealing away her strength, but not her spirit. Elaine's calls became more frequent, each one a subtle reminder of her expectations. Thanksgiving was approaching, and she had made it clear she expected us to join her. It was a delicate balance, trying to cater to her needs without neglecting my mother. The Thanksgiving dinner was a surreal experience. Elaine, dressed in her festive best, chatted animatedly, occasionally throwing glances at my mother, who sat quietly, conserving her energy. I could feel the tension in the air by an unspoken battle of needs and desires. "How's your mom doing?" Elaine asked, her voice tinged with a curiosity that felt more invasive than empathetic. "She's fighting," I replied, forcing a smile. "We're just taking it one day at a time." "That's the spirit," Elaine said, but her eyes quickly shifted to Jake. "We should definitely plan that mountain trip soon, for some fresh air." I bit back a retort, the words "not now" sitting heavily on my tongue. This was not the time for leisure plans, not when every moment with my mother was precious. That night, as Jake and I lay in my old bedroom, the weight of our situation settled heavily on us. We were caught in a tug-of-war between duty and obligation, each pull threatening to tear us apart. "Your mom doesn't get it," Jake whispered, his voice heavy with fatigue. "It's like she's living in a different world." I nodded, the reality of our situation sinking in. We were here for my mother, to support her in her fight against an unrelenting enemy. But in doing so, we had inadvertently ignited another battle, one with an adversary we hadn't anticipated, Elaine's jealousy and unmet expectations. The Thanksgiving dinner at my parents' house with Elaine present was a balancing act on a tightrope. While Mom rested in her chair, conserving her energy, Elaine's presence filled the room like an overzealous perfume. Her laughter was a bit too loud, her stories a bit too long. Jake and I exchanged knowing glances, each trying to mediate the unspoken tension. Elaine's eyes often darted towards my mother, her gaze a mix of curiosity and something I couldn't quite place. Was it envy? Pity? I couldn't tell. Mom, for her part, offered polite smiles, a testament to her enduring grace even in the face of her illness. The real test came when Elaine suggested a post-dinner walk. "A little stroll will do us good," she announced, her voice tinged with an enthusiasm that felt out of place. I hesitated, glancing at Mom. "I think we'll stay in," I said gently. "Mom needs to rest." Elaine's smile faltered for a moment, a flash of disappointment crossing her features before she masked it with a nod. "Of course, dear. Another time, then." As she left with Jake's sister, I couldn't shake off the feeling of guilt. It gnawed at me, the thought that maybe I was being too harsh, too unyielding. But then I looked at Mom. Her face etched with the quiet battle she fought every day, and I knew my loyalty lay with her. The days that followed were a blur of hospital visits, chemotherapy sessions, and quiet evenings at home. Mom's strength ebbed and flowed like the tides, some days bright and talkative, others withdrawn and weary. Through it all, Jake and I were her steadfast anchors, holding on amidst the storm. Meanwhile, Elaine's calls became a constant undercurrent in our lives. "When are you coming to visit?" she would ask, her voice laced with a hint of reproach. "I miss you both so much." Jake handled these conversations with a patience I admired. "We're really tied up with Mom's treatments," he'd explain, his tone apologetic yet firm, "but we'll try to make it soon." Each call ended with promises left hanging like unfinished sentences, and I could sense Jake's frustration growing. It was a tug-of-war between his mother's wants and his own sense of duty towards mine. As Christmas neared, the air grew colder, and so did the atmosphere between us and Elaine. She invited us to her annual family Christmas party, a lavish affair that was the highlight of her social calendar. But the thought of a crowded house, with laughter and merriment, felt jarringly out of sync with our current reality. "We can't," I told Jake, my decision firm. "It's too risky for Mom, and honestly, for me too." Jake agreed, but the task of conveying this to Elaine fell heavily on his shoulders. I could only imagine how she would take this news, another rejection, another preference for my family over hers. But our priority was clear, and it wasn't the festive allure of a Christmas party. It was the quiet, somber room where my mother lay, fighting a battle that overshadowed all else. The decision not to attend Elaine's Christmas party was met with a strained understanding on her part, but the underlying disappointment was palpable. "I understand, dear," she said over the phone, her voice a mixture of resignation and thinly veiled frustration, "but you'll be missing a lovely evening." Jake's response was gentle but unwavering. "Mom's health comes first, you know that." I listened from the other side of the room, a knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach. The situation was delicate, a fragile truce at best, and I feared any wrong word might shatter it. The days leading up to Christmas were a study in contrasts. While Elaine prepared for her festive gathering, our home was enveloped in a quiet routine of caregiving and support for my mother. The joy of the season seemed a distant echo, muffled by the more pressing concerns of health and survival. Elaine's occasional updates about the party preparations felt like intrusions from another world. "We'll have a lovely tree, and the children will put on a little play," she enthused during one call. "That sounds nice," I replied, forcing a smile into my voice. But my mind was elsewhere, on the pale figure resting in the next room, her life hanging in a delicate balance. The day of the party arrived, and with it came a flurry of messages and photos from Elaine, showcasing the festive atmosphere at her home. Each image was a splash of color and light, a stark contrast to the somber tones of our current life. "I wish you could be here," Elaine texted, a note of longing in her words. Jake sighed as he read the message. "I know she's trying to include us, but it just makes it harder." I nodded, understanding his conflict. It was a no-win situation. Staying here was an unspoken acknowledgement of our priorities, but it also meant widening the gap between us and Elaine. As evening fell, the sounds of laughter and music from Elaine's party reached us through phone calls and messages. It was as if the merriment from there underscored the silence in our home. "I feel like I'm letting her down," Jake admitted, his voice heavy with guilt. "You're doing what's right," I reassured him, although I grappled with my own doubts. Were we being unfair to Elaine? But then I looked at my mother, her face serene yet etched with the lines of her struggle, and I knew we had made the only choice we could. That night, as we sat in the quiet living room, the glow of the Christmas lights seemed dimmer, the festive spirit subdued. Our hearts were with Mom, in this battle that allowed no room for distractions, no matter how well-intentioned they might be. Elaine's world of celebrations and gatherings seemed a universe away, and for now, that was a distance we had to maintain. The aftermath of the Christmas party left a subtle shift in Elaine's attitude towards us. Her calls, once filled with exuberant chatter, now carried a note of coolness, a hint of reproach that lingered like a shadow. The emotional distance was growing, a chasm widened by unspoken grievances and misunderstood intentions. Jake and I found ourselves discussing Elaine more often, trying to navigate this delicate terrain. "She just doesn't see the whole picture," Jake would say, his brow furrowed in frustration. It's like she's only thinking about herself." I couldn't help but agree, though a part of me empathized with Elaine's loneliness. It was a confusing tangle of emotions, understanding her need for attention, yet resenting the pressure it put on us. As New Year approached, the tension reached a new height. Elaine called, her voice brittle with contained emotion. "I feel like you're avoiding me," she accused, her words sharp and direct. Jake's response was calm, but I could hear the strain in his voice. "Mom, it's not about avoiding you. We're just really focused on Nerder's mother's name right now." Elaine's reply was a mixture of hurt and anger. "You don't think I understand? I'm a mother too, you know, but you're treating me as if I'm not part of this family." The conversation spiraled into an uncomfortable confrontation, with Elaine expressing her feelings of being sidelined and neglected. Her words were laced with a bitterness that took us by surprise. "You're always there for her, but what about me? Don't I matter?" The call ended on a tense note, leaving an uneasy silence in its wake. I looked at Jake, his face a mask of conflicted emotions. The situation was more complex than we had realized. It wasn't just about Elaine's demands for attention. It was about her feeling of loss, of not being a priority in her son's life anymore. We sat in silence, the weight of the situation settling heavily upon us. It was clear that this was more than just a case of competing demands. It was a deep-seated feeling of jealousy that Elaine harbored, a jealousy that was now openly affecting our relationship. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't help but feel a surge of anger towards Elaine. How could she be so self-centered, so blind to what we were going through? But then, in the quiet of the night, a thought struck me. Perhaps Elaine's jealousy was rooted in fear, a fear of losing her place in her son's life, a fear exacerbated by the crisis we were facing. It was a bitter pill to swallow, recognizing that beneath the surface of Elaine's demands and complaints lay a deeper issue, one that needed addressing. But the question remained, how could we bridge this growing gap? How could we heal the wounds that were slowly tearing our family apart? The days that followed were a dance around unspoken words and unaddressed feelings. Jake and I knew that the situation with Elaine couldn't be left to fester, yet the courage to confront it head-on was hard to muster. Each of Elaine's calls now felt like walking on a tightrope, balancing between reassurance and honesty, trying not to fall into an abyss of conflict. Finally, one chilly evening, Jake decided it was time to address the elephant in the room. "We need to talk to her, face to face," he said, determination lacing his voice. "This can't go on like this." I agreed, albeit with a sense of trepidation. The thought of confronting Elaine, of laying bare all the hurt and misunderstandings, was daunting. Yet the need for resolution, for some semblance of peace, was greater. We arranged to meet Elaine at a small cafe, a neutral ground away from the emotional landscapes of our homes. The meeting was tense from the outset. Elaine's smile was tight, her eyes guarded. We exchanged pleasantries, but they were just brittle veneers over the turmoil underneath. Jake took the lead. "Mom, we need to talk about what's been going on," he began, his voice steady but gentle. Elaine's facade wavered, her eyes flashing a mix of defensiveness and hurt. "So now you have time for me?" she retorted, the bitterness evident. "We've always had time for you," I interjected, trying to keep my voice even. "But Mom's illness, it's been consuming us." Elaine shook her head, a sigh escaping her. I understand that she's sick, but what about me? Don't I count for anything? The conversation unfolded, a raw and honest dialogue that peeled back layers of hurt, assumptions, and unspoken fears. Elaine spoke of feeling abandoned, of fearing that she had lost her place in Jake's life. Jake expressed his struggle to balance his duties, his guilt over not being able to meet everyone's expectations. There were tears, moments of heated words, but also instances of quiet understanding. It was a cathartic release, an airing of grievances that had long been suppressed. I just feel so alone, Elaine confessed, her voice cracking with emotion. Ever since you moved, I feel like I've been losing you. Jake reached across the table, taking his mother's hand. You're not losing me, Mom, but we have to face what's in front of us right now. Nair's mother's name needs us. As the conversation drew to a close, there was a sense of relief, a lightening of the load we had all been carrying. It wasn't a magical resolution. The issues were too complex for quick fixes. But it was a start, a step towards understanding and healing. We left the cafe with a tentative plan to stay more connected, to include Elaine in our lives in ways that were manageable given our current circumstances. It was a compromise, an acknowledgement of each other's needs and limitations. That night, as I sat beside my mother, holding her frail hand in mine, I felt a sense of peace. The confrontation with Elaine had been difficult, but it had opened a door to empathy and understanding, a path to navigate this challenging journey with a little more grace and a little less burden. In the weeks that followed our meeting with Elaine, a subtle change began to weave through our interactions. The air of tension that once hung between us started to dissipate, replaced by a cautious but growing understanding. We kept Elaine more involved through regular phone calls and occasional visits, ensuring she felt included and valued. Elaine, for her part, seemed to make an effort to understand the gravity of our situation. She started asking more about my mother's health, her voice carrying genuine concern. It was a small but significant shift, indicating a willingness to see beyond her own needs. Jake and I also worked on balancing our time and energy. We realized that while my mother's illness demanded much of us, it was important not to neglect other relationships, especially with Elaine. It was a delicate balancing act, but one we were now more equipped to handle with empathy and understanding. As spring approached, bringing with it a sense of renewal, so too did our family dynamics begin to find a new equilibrium. My mother's health showed small but encouraging signs of improvement, and with it, our spirits lifted. The heavy burden of the past months started to ease, allowing us to breathe a little more freely. Elaine's transformation was perhaps the most remarkable. The jealousy and bitterness that had once clouded her interactions with us slowly faded, revealing a more compassionate and understanding side of her. She even started joining us for quiet afternoons with my mother, bringing with her an air of warmth and positivity. One such afternoon, as we sat in the garden, Elaine reached out to my mother, taking her hand gently. "I'm here for you too," she said softly. The moment was simple yet profound, marking a new chapter in our relationship. Jake and I watched this exchange, a sense of relief and gratitude washing over us. The journey had been long and fraught with challenges, but it had brought us to a place of greater understanding and compassion. As the story of our family unfolded, I realized the power of open communication and empathy. Our confrontation with Elaine had opened a door to healing, not just for our strained relationships, but also within ourselves. It taught us the importance of facing difficulties head-on, of acknowledging and addressing the emotions that drive us. The final chapter of this journey was yet to be written, but as I looked at my family, united in our garden, I felt hopeful. We had navigated the stormy waters of jealousy, illness, and misunderstanding, and had found a way to emerge stronger and more connected. Life, I understood, was a tapestry of complex emotions and experiences. But with love, patience, and a willingness to understand each other's perspectives, we could weave a story of resilience and togetherness. And in that story, we found our strength and our peace.